Today we're going to be discussing the heavyweights of the stroller world, the Stokke Trailz and the Bugaboo Buffalo. The Bugaboo Buffalo has recently been discontinued, but you can still buy them in stores while they still have stock to sell. It's going to be replaced with the vastly inferior Bugaboo Fox. Both of these are our favorite strollers of all time, and that has a lot to do with where we live, which is here in Norway and in Oslo. So if you're living in an area that is more urban, but you still want to be able to go off-road, you have use for a stroller without a car, you don't live in a car culture sort of area where you're always concerned about the size of it folding down inside a car and the weight, basically when you're not actually using the stroller, but you want something that you can wake up and put your child in and take them to kindergarten or to the park and have something that's going to feel very comfortable, a lot of shock absorption over terrain, nice and large, but yet with swivel wheels in the front so that you can do shopping, something that you can carry a lot of stuff in as well. Then these are the strollers for you. These are the two top strollers in that respect. In relation to these two strollers, a few numbers. The Trailz is slightly heavier when it comes to having a bag or a seat. It's about 4 kilos heavier. The reason for this being that they have a sturdy plastic construction in both the bag and the seat, whereas Bugaboo has always done a bit more of a hammock style. They have a lightweight frame and then the fabrics hang off it and are sturdied by various plastic struts. Again, slightly heavier when you consider the bag or the seat. When you have the bag on, both of them are 9 kilos according to product description, but really how long you use the bag has more to do with how long your child wants to lie down inside a bag. Once they start sitting up, you're supposed to use the seat in. So in relation to the seat, you actually get a little bit longer use out of the Buffalo. It's up to 17 kilos on the child, while the Trailz is up to 15 kilos. In relation to the shopping basket underneath, the Trailz outperforms the Buffalo by about 3 times, both weight and volume. You can just see that. It's a much larger underslung carriage on the Trailz. In relation to child comfort, again, both of these are luxury models, both in relation to the bag and the seat. They're large and spacious. Both of them are reversible, so that's more important, of course, when you have the seat, because you want the child to both be able to face forwards or face you. Very nice to have a reversible seat, but there are things that go in design with this. There's a slight edge on the Trailz for having a higher point at which the seat or the bag is fastened. It brings the child a little bit closer to you, makes it easier to interact and to fix things. In addition, one thing I noticed with the Buffalo and with Bugaboo in general, and this might just be me and my kids, it might not be a problem for everybody, but when the child is facing you, these telescopic clips are a little bit annoying if you have a curious child who likes to reach out and tease you by opening them up all the time. That doesn't really happen on the Trailz. It's a little harder to move the telescopic clips for a child, but that's a minor point. In relation to the canopies, I've always liked this extra length that you get with the Bugaboo Buffalo and with a lot of the newer canopies on Bugaboo. So you do get a slightly longer sun coverage just from what you get on the stroller. It's relatively long on the Trailz as well, but it's not quite as long. But there is, of course, generic sun covers that you can buy and so on in order to use on your stroller. In relation to ease of use, again, both of these are terrain strollers. They're large and heavy. I suppose that the stock stroller does have a little bit easier time over terrain as a result of weight, since it does have a little bit added weight and a little bit more inbuilt shock absorption. It has this nice fat shock absorption central element there. You do feel when you have this fully loaded down that you can get over tree roots and get over rocky areas a little bit better than with the Buffalo. But both of these are made for terrain, and both of them are nice and heavy and will function well. This is where weight actually counts on a stroller, is when you're going through terrain. In relation to the front wheels, and this is no longer relevant for newer models, but the Buffalo has an ingenious shock absorption system in the front wheels, which allows it to not really have any sort of problems with relation to swivel or locking to the side. The Trailz now also comes with a inbuilt shock absorption system. It always had one, but it has been vastly improved. So at this point, that's not really a relevant comparison with newer models, but if you're buying something on the used market, that is one thing that you might want to consider with relation to Buffalo. Stock in general has this kind of constant innovation in relation to the same models that they're dealing with. So things are constantly being improved. So you will notice things on newer models of the Trailz that have been improved over older models without it coming out as like an entirely new stroller, which is something Bugaboo tends to do. And I'll talk more about that a little bit later. In relation to a couple other things with ease of use, when you're removing the textiles, it is a lot easier on the Bugaboo Buffalo. You have Velcro and things just kind of slide on the frames. If you need to wash or repair the textiles on stock, it is a little bit harder to do. We have videos that will show you how to do it on both. It is possible, of course, but it's slightly harder to do with the Trailz model. In relation to maintenance, so with regards to lubrication, it's a little bit more important with the Trailz that you properly lubricate the stroller. It's a great stroller. You need to keep it properly maintained to keep it in good working order. You want to have your wheels pumped to the proper limits. You want to use thicker greases of the appropriate types in the front end. We have videos covering this sort of thing. You want to use spray greases in the brake system. And in order to keep your Trailz in good working order, you do need to lubricate it and you need to maintain it in that sense. With the Buffalo, a little bit less maintenance is necessary. It is, of course, good to lubricate it, but brake system and front wheels don't tend to have as many problems if you're a little bit more lax about your lubrication. In relation to maintenance with this one, after a while, if you notice any sort of looseness in the central mechanism, it's very important to tighten it up. And we have videos showing that as well. You want to flip off this cap, and there's a big fat screw there. You want to screw it in tight on both sides. You can also maintain a little bit of tightness in the screws here for the handle. That is not something you have to think about on the Trailz. There's nothing you really need to tighten as a matter of maintenance. In relation to the mechanics of the stroller, again, both these are very sturdy strollers. With relation to the Buffalo, it is more complex in its mechanisms. In general, Bugaboo has highly complex mechanisms. But the complexity is not in your face, as it is with the Bugaboo Fox, as far as we feel it. And it is very sturdy, despite the fact that it has complex mechanisms. The only thing that we tend to notice going wrong on this, to be honest, the most common thing, sometimes I have a brakes issue or front wheel issue, is rare, is that the only thing that generally comes in is that one of these is broken, and that's generally a result of airplane damage, baggage handlers not dealing with it properly, or people slamming inside a car and breaking off one of those pokers, those connection struts. Another thing about this mechanically is that a lot of the mechanisms on this stroller are the same as the Bugaboo Donkey. Bugaboo Donkey is a two-child stroller, and yet you'll notice that the mechanisms can be swapped out between the Buffalo and the Donkey in relation to central mechanism, in relation to the arms, although they are a little bit longer here. Brake system, a lot of things like this. What that means to me is that they made this sturdier than it needed to be for the intended weights to some extent. I'm not necessarily talking about weight of the child, because that stuff is determined by the sturdiness of the frame and the frame mechanisms, but just in general, the robustness of the chassis itself is likely more sturdy than you would naturally think for a single child stroller, simply because they've used the same stuff that they've used on the double child stroller. And we do notice this. This is very odd for Bugaboo, and probably one of the reasons it's been taken off the market, because they tend to want to make things as lightweight as possible and really cut the limits there. But that's something we love about the Buffalo. It just has incredible sturdiness, and part of that, again, is because a lot of the mechanisms are designed to be rolled off the production line, both for the Buffalo and the Donkey at the same time. As I said, though, usually things don't go wrong with this. When things do go wrong with the stroller, you're going to have a lot of trouble getting parts. You're going to wind up having to buy used Buffalo chassis and swapping out parts. In order to do this, Bugaboo will not just sell you parts, they'll make you buy an entirely new chassis. And as the Buffalo is now off the market, it's going to get harder and harder to get parts for it. So, that being said, the way I kind of feel about these two models is, at the moment now, If I were to buy a used stroller and it had to do with an older model Buffalo and an older model Trailz, I probably would go for the Buffalo, assuming that I could see that nothing was wrong with it. And we have videos what to look for when you're buying used strollers, in both these cases. If I were buying new, I would definitely go for the Trailz, and that has to do with the company design philosophy, which I will get to in a moment. So that was the Bugaboo Buffalo. One last note on the mechanics, it has to do with the textiles. The textiles on this model do tend to fade quite a lot in the sun. For that reason, we tend to find the textiles, Stokke's textiles, to be of a higher quality. That is a problem you're going to have in general with this model and with a lot of Bugaboo's textiles. In relation to the mechanics of the Stokke Trailz, it is simpler in relation to its mechanisms, and for that reason there are fewer things that are going to go wrong as a result of complexity. It sort of has that Nordic minimalism design aesthetic that is really frequent with a lot of the other products that Stokke produces. It is, as I mentioned before, very important that this thing is maintained properly in relation to lubrication. So if you're buying one of these used, it's important that you check out the brakes and the front wheels in particular, also the central mechanism, everything locks in place. Because if it hasn't been maintained properly, then you can wind up with some problems there. In general though, in relation to mechanics, one chief advantage for Stokke over Bugaboo, I would say, has to do with kind of the company's philosophy with the evolution of the stroller. I just wanted to take a moment to say that while Bugaboo tends to just produce new models and replace one with another and kind of reinvent the wheel the whole time, Stokke has sort of a continuous evolution in relation to how well the mechanisms function, how sturdy they function, and it's not dependent on them putting out a new model all the time. So if they have a new brake system that's better, they're just going to start throwing it into the production line. And the same goes with the front end, with the swivel wheels. I've seen that happen. The leather handle, various improvements to the central mechanism. When they figure this stuff out, they just throw it right back into the production line and roll it out. And this combined with a very strong guarantee policy means that if you buy one of these, not only are you kind of safer when things go wrong, because it's a lot easier to either get parts, send it in for repair. Bugaboo does not maintain any sort of repair shops, whereas Stokke does. But also, if you need to use your guarantee for the stroller, you're going to get the newer designed elements into it. And we really like that about Stokke in general. It kind of has kind of philosophy similar to like Toyota or something. It's like continuously looking to improve the designs of something that they feel is good and should stay in the line. So they got rid of Cruzy. Cruzy was a simpler, not as good version as the Trailz, and they kept the Trailz and they decided to continue improving upon it. And that kind of goes with a lot of other things in their line, their chairs and other sorts of baby pockets. And they're trying to just perfect one sort of thing and keep it going. We would have loved Bugaboo to do the same thing with the Buffalo, and again, we're kind of hoping that they'll bring it back in the future. But because they don't maintain that sort of connection, I think, between sort of an after-sales, looking at what's gone wrong with your stroller and like the development, you will generally see the improvements coming out with the newer models of strollers as they come. And they are geniuses in their design as well. But it's different because of that. So that was our comparison between the Bugaboo Buffalo and the Stokke Trailz. Again, we love both of these strollers very much. Part of that has to do with where we live. Not living in an area where you need to have a car all the time, but you do want to have a stroller that can do both road, city, and shopping and everything. If that fits you, then I recommend both of these strollers to you. They're both very, very good. And we hope this video has been helpful. If it has, please subscribe, as it helps us continue making videos in the future.